The movie begins by introducing two young boys, Scene and Pio, who are orphans and have been bought by an old man called Uncle Wo to work as slaves. Despite facing difficulties, they work hard to survive and help each other. They both share a common dream inspired by seeing the skill of a great general named General Ah Ki. They hope to become famous generals themselves. During their spare time, while collecting wood and cutting logs, Scene and Pio have joint training sessions deep in the forest, using homemade wooden swords. Over time, they regularly practice together to improve their fighting skills and agility. By dedicating themselves to training every day, they become skilled swordsmen and strong fighters. One day, while practicing, General Chang watches Pio's swordsmanship and praises his skill. The next day, General Chang went to Uncle Wo's house and informed him that the royal court was enlisting soldiers from different areas. He asked for permission for Pio to join the kingdom's special soldier training. Although Scene didn't get the same chance, he was happy for Pio and promised to support him fully in achieving his goal. That night, before they went their separate ways, Pio and Scene had one last practice session of sword fighting and promised to keep pursuing their dreams. Scene decided to step up his training efforts, aiming to catch up with Pio and become a royal soldier, bringing them closer to their shared dream of becoming great generals. A few days later, Scene increased his training in the cave on the hillside, concentrating on improving his swordsmanship. His committed practice led to notable enhancements in his fighting skills, evident when he effortlessly broke a boulder with his wooden sword. A couple of days later, while taking a break in his isolated hut, Scene was surprised by Pio's sudden appearance, who seemed to be seriously injured. In his final moments, Pio disclosed startling news of a rebellion in the kingdom, led by the younger brother of the current king, who had sent an assassin to murder the king. In the chaos, Pio was forced by royal authorities to pretend to be the king, which led to his tragic death. Before he died, Pio gave Scene an important task: to travel to a village marked on a map he had. He said that in the village, Scene would find an army that could train him to become a better fighter. That night, Scene ran quickly towards the village Pio mentioned. However, on the way, he came across a group of criminals who surrounded him, forcing him to fight. Luckily, because of his extensive training, he was able to defeat all the members of the gang by himself. Continuing on his journey, Scene finally arrived at the specified village, where he found a simple hut occupied by a man named King Keen, who had escaped from the kingdom. King Keen then disclosed to Scene that General Chang had intentionally brought Pio to the kingdom because of his striking similarity to him. Their intention was to deceive the traitorous royal officials who had plotted a coup with his younger brother, Prince Seikyo. Meanwhile, the soldiers of the royal army reached Uncle Wo's house and discovered Pio's lifeless body. General Ji, who was aligned with Prince Seikyo, realized that the person he had mistakenly killed earlier was not King Keen, but a commoner named Pio. At the same time, Scene, now understanding the kingdom's betrayal and Pio's sacrifice, holds deep resentment towards King Keen. During their intense conversation, an assassin sent by Prince Seikyo suddenly enters their hut, aiming to kill King Keen. The assassin tries to manipulate Scene into killing King Keen, claiming that he and other royal officials were responsible for Pio's death. Instead of following the assassin's instructions, Scene fights and defeats him, suspecting him of Pio's murder. In a fierce battle with deadly moves, Scene ultimately triumphs over the assassin. After the fight, he returns to King Keen, expressing his ongoing sorrow over Pio's death. Despite this, King Keen tried to calm Scene down, explaining that Pio's hardships were a sacrifice made to protect the entire kingdom. He clarified that his own survival was crucial to prevent his cruel and corrupt younger brother from seizing the throne, which would inevitably lead to the kingdom's downfall. King Keen suggested to Scene the idea of forming a new army together to confront Prince Seikyo, ensuring that Pio's sacrifice would not be in vain. On the other hand, Prince Seikyo was filled with disappointment and anger upon discovering King Keen's survival. He then ordered his allies to send more assassins to hunt down his older brother. The next day, while King Keen and Scene were traveling through the forest, they were attacked by an assassin armed with a poisoned needle weapon. Scene fought the assassin until he managed to behead him with his sword. However, shortly after, Scene collapsed and started to lose consciousness because of the poison from the needle. Thankfully, King Keen rescued Scene and tended to his injuries until he recovered. When Scene woke up, their hideout was suddenly invaded by a group of royal soldiers. Luckily, these soldiers were led by General Chang, who remained faithful to King Keen. Swearing his loyalty to King Keen, General Chang helped in devising a plan to reclaim the throne from Prince Siqiu. Meanwhile, despite Prince Siqiu's unsuccessful attempts to get rid of King Keen, he decided to declare himself as the new king in front of the entire kingdom's army. On the other hand, King Keen felt discouraged as his army was greatly outnumbered by the royal army. To address this issue, one of his generals suggested seeking help from the mountain tribes to strengthen their forces. Taking this advice into account, King Keen immediately ordered his army to march towards the territory of the mountain tribes. After a challenging journey filled with obstacles, King Keen and his army arrived at the borderlands of the mountain tribes. However, upon reaching there, they were not welcomed warmly by the tribal forces, but instead were captured and held prisoner. Confronting the leader of the mountain tribe, King Keen pleaded for help in retaking the throne stolen by his younger brother. Despite his request, the tribal leaders rejected it, pointing to past betrayals by the royal court, which had led to the deaths of many mountain tribe warriors. However, refusing to give up, King Keen sincerely apologized to the members of the mountain tribe for the past wrongs committed by the royal officials. Touched by his genuine regret, the leader of the mountain tribe decided to forgive him and agreed to assist in reclaiming the throne. The mountain tribespeople pledged their support to King Keen's army to launch an attack on the royal palace. Following this, King Keen and his companions began planning strategies to confront the royal forces from different directions. He assigned Scene and General Chang to lead the first army, while he himself, disguised as a member of the mountain tribe, would lead the second army alongside the mountain tribe warriors and their leader. The next day, when the mountain tribe's army and King Keen's forces arrived in the kingdom, the leader of the mountain tribe informed the kingdom's commander that her troops would join forces with Prince Siqiu's army. Recognizing the goodwill behind this decision, the royal commander allowed the mountain tribe soldiers to enter the kingdom. Once inside, both the mountain tribespeople and King Keen's army quickly launched an attack on the soldiers guarding the gate. Following this, King Keen instructed Scene and the first army to take a hidden path, while he and the second army, along with the mountain tribe leader, would proceed through the main route. A massive battle broke out as the mountain tribe warriors clashed with the kingdom's defenders. Utilizing the impressive combat skills and strength of the mountain tribesmen, King Keen managed to overpower most of the royal soldiers. At the same time, Scene and the first army encountered a formidable giant monster while traversing the secret passage. Despite facing initial challenges in defeating the creature, Scene eventually dealt a decisive blow with his exceptionally powerful sword, killing the beast. Afterwards, Scene and the initial squadron managed to sneak into the royal palace with the aim of taking out Prince Siqiu. However, they discovered him sitting proudly on the throne, calmly calling for one of the kingdom's most skilled generals, General Ji. Scene was faced with a one-on-one duel with General Ji, and he quickly accepted the challenge. The clash between them was fierce, as both displayed remarkable swordsmanship. However, Scene displayed a greater resolve and determination than General Ji, ultimately winning the duel. After seeing General Ji defeated, Prince Siqiu chose to escape from the palace. Yet, as he reached the palace gates, he discovered himself surrounded by King Keen and the mountain tribe army. King Keen encountered minimal resistance when fighting Prince Siqiu, swiftly overpowering him with one decisive strike. Shortly afterward, General Aki, famed as the strongest general from a neighboring kingdom, approached King Keen and asked about the cause of the conflict. In reply, King Keen stated his determination to reclaim the throne to prevent its misuse by traitorous individuals within the royal circle. His ultimate aim was to unite all the kingdoms of Japan, promoting justice and peace across the land. Upon hearing King Keen's noble aspirations, General Aki promised his support and vowed to help achieve peace. However, a royal general loyal to Prince Seikyo refused to accept King Qin's victory and quickly ordered his troops to attack General Aki and King Qin. Nevertheless, with unwavering confidence, General Aki effortlessly defeated all the soldiers with one decisive strike. Observing this demonstration of skill, the loyal general to Prince Seikyo grew enraged and tried to attack King Qin. Luckily, Xin quickly stepped in, stopping the general's assault and swiftly defeating him with a swing of his sword. General Aki praised Xin's courageous intervention, foreseeing that he would one day rise to become one of the kingdom's most powerful generals. Following his praise of Xin, General Aki and his soldiers left the kingdom. Yet, before they left, Xin introduced himself to General Aki and asked him to remember his name. With Prince Seikyo defeated and the disloyal generals defeated, King Qin and his army celebrated their victory, having successfully regained the royal throne from the traitors. The mountain tribespeople joined in the festivities, considering the triumph as their own. Before the mountain tribe leader left the royal palace, he presented Xin with a prestigious sword as a symbol of gratitude for his courage and commitment. Now, with acknowledgement from a formidable general like General Aki and the esteemed sword from the mountain tribe, Xin was one step closer to achieving his dream of becoming a great general in the future kingdom. The movie starts by showing ancient China, around 200 years BC, when the land was divided into 7 states that had been continuously at war for the last 500 years. In the state of Qin, King Aisei was ousted by his younger brother after years of conflict. Fortunately, Aisei encounters Xin, a slave who dreams of becoming a great general, who ultimately helps the king in reclaiming his throne by uniting various tribes in the Qin region. Several years later, as Aisei is about to rest, he is suddenly attacked by assassins who manage to infiltrate the palace. Aisei tries to resist with his limited sword skills until the guards arrive, including Xin, who eventually faces the assassins alone. As Xin begins to struggle against the formidable opponents, Karyoten comes to help, allowing Xin to defeat the 2 assassins. Before taking his last breath, one of the assassins threatens that the assassin clan will destroy Qin. Shortly after, a guard informs Aisei of an impending attack by the Wei state, signaling imminent war. Despite Xin's role in hipping the king's rage in his throne, he cannot be appointed directly as a general. Instead, he must begin as a soldier alongside fellow peasants who will advance to the front lines. In the war, the Qin state will be led by General Hiyoko, who is the junior of the great General Oki. Meanwhile, Xin, who is still a slave, will become an infantry soldier with his childhood friends Bito and Bihei, who are from the same area. Upon reuniting, Xin tells them that he has saved Aisei, earning recognition from the king. However, Bito and Bihei, considering Xin's tale far-fetched, are taken aback when they see him acquainted with a war commander, questioning how a slave like Xin could be acquainted with such a figure. Once all the infantry soldiers gathered, they were divided into several small groups. Xin found himself in a group with his 2 friends and a quiet girl named Kyokai, whom they initially mistook for a man due to her face cover. Meanwhile, the Wei State's army, under the command of General Gokei, known as the 7 Fire Dragons, had prepared themselves. Gokei was notorious for his ruthlessness, particularly towards the Qin state. With hundreds of thousands of troops assembled, Gokei had seized control of 2 hills overlooking the battlefield to gain an advantage. Returning to Xin, he was surprised to learn that he would be led by Bakuko Xin, a war commander known for his cruelty but lacking in war strategy. As the war drums sounded, signaling the start of the battle, Xin, along with other Qin soldiers, received no instructions from Bakuko Xin. Undeterred, Xin dashed to the front lines, disrupting the enemy's defensive formation with his bold attack. Taking advantage of the chaos caused by Xin's assault, other Qin soldiers breached the enemy lines. Although General Gokei viewed Xin's actions as reckless, they proved effective in decimating enemy forces, eliminating one of their commanders, and forcing the Wei soldiers to retreat. Upon learning of their defeat, a vice-general from the Wei state swiftly commanded his troops to deploy war chariots armed with shields and weaponry, catching Sin and his fellow soldiers off guard. Despite encountering strong resistance, Hiyoko instructed his troops to maintain their positions without sending reinforcements, seemingly sacrificing Sin and others on the front lines. As Sin and his group found themselves cornered by enemy attacks, Kyokai proposed a strategy of using fallen soldiers' bodies to construct a barricade. Once the barricade was set up, Sin took on the task of carrying a flag to lure the war chariots towards them. With limited visibility due to thick dust on the battlefield, the enemy soldiers failed to notice the pile of corpses in front of them, allowing the war chariots to be easily toppled. Unexpectedly, this was the reason Hiyoko chose to hold back his forces, realizing that the Qin forces were outnumbered by the Wei state. If the general forced more troops down, they would lose quickly. Upon hearing reports of resilient farmers, Hiyoko saw it as a glimmer of hope that could potentially turn the tide of the war if he could maximize that small hope. Unfortunately, this made it difficult for the infantry soldiers as they continued to fight until nightfall without any assistance from General Hiyoko. Exhausted and forced into hiding, Sin and his comrades were eventually discovered by the enemy, compelling Sin to confront them alone. Witnessing Sin overwhelmed, Kyokai finally intervened, employing her lethal techniques that resembled singing and dancing. With her skills, Kyokai managed to dispatch numerous enemy soldiers single-handedly, although she eventually began to struggle as she ran out of breath. In the midst of the chaos, Sin and the others, who initially mistook Kyokai for a man, were astonished when her face cover was lifted, revealing her true identity as a woman. Faced with an increasingly impossible to resist, Sin and Kyokai made the decision to jump into the river. After the situation calmed down, Kyokai revealed her motive for joining the Qin state's war was to avenge her sister's death. She confessed that she belonged to an assassin clan, where candidates from various tribes fought for leadership, with only one survivor becoming the clan leader. Unfortunately, Kyokai's sister entered the candidacy and lost, falling victim to her rival, now in the Wei state. Unable to enter the Wei state directly, Kyokai opted to join the war, hoping that a Qin victory would grant her entry to seek revenge. Upon hearing Kyokai's story, Sin empathized with her sorrow, encouraging her not to abandon her sister's dream, much like Sin's own dream of becoming a great general. The following day, as the war resumed, Sin regrouped with other surviving infantry soldiers who had taken refuge on a hill overnight. Despite some Qin soldiers feeling hopeless at the sight of numerous Wei combat battalions, Sin spotted an opportunity to strike the enemy's defense corps nearby. Shortly after, Sin led them to attack the hill where the Wei State Army's vice general was stationed just as the Qin army was being bombarded by the Wei forces on the battlefield. Sin's actions actually made Hiyoko realize there was hope for Qin's victory, so he immediately ordered all troops to join the battle. He even asked Bakuko Sin to assist Sin's group attacking the hill area. The sudden arrival of reinforcements from the Qin state seemed to overpower the opposing forces. Meanwhile, Sin, leading Bakuko Sin's main forces, succeeded in breaching the enemy's final defense line on the hill. Bakuko Sin then instructed Sin to accompany the cavalry forces in attacking the Wei state's vice general, while the remaining infantry held off enemy soldiers from pursuing them. Though reluctant to leave his comrades, Sin trusted Kyokai to protect them and followed the commander's orders. While Kyokai and the others held back the enemy, Sin and Bakuko Sin's troops confronted the enemy's archer units, capable of decimating half of Bakuko Sin's forces in one attack. Utilizing his ability to anticipate arrow movements, Sin launched a surprise attack on the archers, impressing the Wei vice general. At the same time, Bakuko Sin made a desperate move towards the vice general's position. Seizing an opportunity when the vice general approached, Bakuko Sin deliberately sacrificed himself to draw the vice general closer, allowing him to fatally wound the vice general with a small knife. With the vice general's demise, Sin and the Qin forces celebrated their capture of the hill. Unfortunately, the war was not over as they saw tens of thousands of Wei troops emerging from behind the hill under the direct command of Gokei. Although outnumbered, Sin's actions and those of other infantry soldiers managed to clear a path for Hiyoko's forces to launch a direct attack on Gokei's troops. As the Qin forces still worried over the impending battle, General Oki and his troops suddenly surged forward, effortlessly dismantling the enemy's front defense lines before joining Sin and his comrades on the hill. Oki's appearance on the battlefield wasn't to assist the Qin forces, but to observe the battle's progression. Yet the presence of a great general seemed to worry the Wei state forces, because if Oki intervened in the battle, the Qin state would have a greater chance of winning. In that moment, Oki tasked Sin with learning from Hiyoko's tactics, emphasizing the general's reliance on instinct over reason. This was evidenced by Hiyoko's decision to withhold his forces until a certain X factor appeared, signaling the opportune moment to turn the tide of battle. Oki cited Hiyoko's daring move to directly assault Gokei's troops as a demonstration of this reliance on the elusive X factor for victory. Meanwhile, Gokei, the Wei state's formidable general, countered Hiyoko's attack by dispatching cavalry units to encircle and eliminate the Qin forces from behind. Oki added that according to military strategy, Hiyoko's attack would not yield results, but the outcome still depended on the X factor present on the battlefield. After hearing to Oki's insightful explanation, Sin, inspired by the general's words, requested permission to join Hiyoko's forces in combat against the enemy. Witnessing Sin's unwavering determination, Oki provided him with a horse so that he could swiftly join the Qin forces, eager to see if Sin could bring about a change in the unfavorable war situation for the Qin forces. Without hesitation, Sin charged into the battlefield, confronting the enemy fleet attempting to attack Hiyoko's troops. Drawing from his past experiences, Sin targeted one of the Wei state's war chariot fleets, knowing that these war chariots had weaknesses he could exploit. Despite the chariot's capacity to carry more soldiers, Sin noticed their restricted mobility compared to cavalry units. Exploiting this weakness, Sin devised a plan to dismantle a frontline chariot fleet, triggering a chain reaction causing subsequent chariots to collide and crumble. With Sin's strategy, he managed to incapacitate a portion of the Wei state's cavalry forces, thereby confirming that he was the X factor mentioned by Oki, because Sin's actions facilitated Hiyoko and his troops to pass through several enemy defense barricades until the general finally faced off against Gokei, his longtime adversary. As the two generals confronted each other, they decided for a duel, halting the ongoing battle. When all troops ceased fighting, they approached each other on their horses to engage in combat, and in the duel, Hiyoko appeared to overpower Gokei after the Qin general successfully decapitated Gokei. With Gokei's defeat, the war was won by the Wei state as all the Wei soldiers cheered joyfully over their victory. Shortly after, Sin bid farewell to Kyokai, who planned to continue her mission of infiltrating the Wei state, while he returned to the palace to meet with Issei and Karyoten. Throughout the war, Issei and Karyoten had been studying the strategies employed by the kingdom's war strategists against the Wei state. At that moment, Karyoten announced her decision to participate in the upcoming battle as a war strategist, contributing to the war's direction. Meanwhile, impressed by Sin's battlefield prowess, the top military officials of the Qin state recommended him for promotion to the rank of war commander. Thus, Sin succeeded in making history as a slave who rose to become a battalion commander in just one battle. In the film's conclusion, Minister Ryofui, accompanied by his trusted associates General Mobu and General Soheikun, meets with Issei. Ryofui is known to be Issei's uncle and is suspected by the palace as the one who infiltrated mercenaries to assassinate the king, because Ryofui also harboring the ambitions for the throne of the Qin state. His presence at the palace suggests his courage in confronting Issei directly, despite rumors swirling around him. Ryofui seems confident that Issei lacks the resolve to challenge him, especially since he has gathered considerable power to resist the Qin king. The movie opens by showing 200 years BC, where the Qin state emerged victorious in a war against the Wei state, with a slave named Sin playing a significant role, eventually rising to the rank of battalion commander. Over the last 6 months, Sin was directly trained by the Qin state's Grand General named Oki, who tasked Sin with supporting the weakest tribes in the Qin state to win battles against other tribes. With Xin's intelligence, he devised clever strategies that ultimately helped the weakest tribes to fight against their enemies. Several months later, as the proud Qin general Hiyoko prepared to expand the borders, the Qin state faced a sudden attack from the Zhou state, seeking revenge for their previous defeat in a war. 16 years ago, during a war between Qin and Zhao, a Qin general had mercilessly slaughtered surrendered Zhao troops. Since then, the Zhou state has harbored a grudge against the Qin general's unfair treatment. Upon hearing about the internal conflict in the Qin state, as Minister Raofui plotted to seize King Aizi's throne, the Zhao troops saw an opportunity to avenge the past massacre. Because the attack was sudden, Aizi, who couldn't call upon Hiyoko's troops on duty, had to reluctantly summon Raofui and his trusted aides to handle the Zhou state's attack. Although Aizi knew that his decision would put him in debt to his uncle, who harbored for the throne, Aizi felt he had no other choice as Raofui commanded a considerable military force. When facing Aizi, Raofui suggested forming an emergency force and asked Aizi to appoint General Mobu, who was Raofui's trusted confidant, as the commander against the Zhou state's troops. On the other hand, a government official named Shabun Kun questioned the decision to appoint Mobu as the Qin state's war commander, noting that Mobu's expertise primarily lay in offensive tactics rather than defense. Given the conditions of the war against Zhao, which required both offensive and defensive strategies, Shabun Kun argued that only Oki could effectively handle the situation. However, Oki was currently resting from the war, leaving Shabun Kun's request unanswered. At the same time, Shabun Kun also enlisted Xin to strengthen the Qin state's military against the Zhou troops. In the midst of this discussion, Oki and Xin suddenly entered the royal chamber, with Oki expressing his willingness to assume the role of war commander. This led Mobu, who initially was considered the strongest candidate for the war commander, to reluctantly accept being a battalion commander to reinforce Oki's troops on the battlefield. At that moment, Oki then requested a private conversation with Aizi, while everyone else leaving the chamber, allowing Oki to discuss the king's motives for uniting the conflicted states on the Chinese mainland. Reflecting on the past, during the reign of Aizi's grandfather, King Cixi, the Qin state was esteemed for its leadership under 6 grand generals, including Oki. During Cixi's reign, a ceasefire between the Qin and Zhou states was established after Tou, Aizi's father and the crown prince, was detained by the Zhou state as a guarantee. During his captivity, Aizi was born and grew up with his father in Zhou until one day, Raofui orchestrated a rescue for the royal members. Unfortunately, he only managed to save Tou, leaving Aizi to fend for himself in Zhou. For years, Aizi grew up without family and was considered an enemy by all Zhou citizens until a black market merchant named Sika saved him and provided him with a place to hide. Several years later, Aizi learned of King Cixi's passing, which resulted in Aizi's ascension to the position of royal crown prince, with Tou assuming the throne as the new Qin king. The Qin state promptly dispatched a spy to retrieve Aizi and return him to the palace. Aware of this, Sika and her companions resolved to help Aizi in returning his homeland by utilizing their smuggling network into Zhou. Despite successfully bribing the guards along their route, their plan was thwarted at the final checkpoint when a guard suddenly shot an arrow at the concealed box where Aizi was hiding, injuring his arm. Remarkably, Aizi remained calm as all his suffering after being abandoned by Tou had him to pain and emotion, leading him to doubt his ability to be a good king. However, Sika reassured him and urged him to safely return to the Qin state. Shortly after, Zhao troops, aware of Aizi's escape, were sent to pursue him. This caused Sika's plan to smuggle Aizi to fail as they were attacked by Zhao troops, and Sika and the others were forced to sacrifice their lives to save Aizi before he finally met with the Qin troops. Upon discovering Sika severely wounded from the enemy's arrow, Aizi was overcome with suppressed emotions of sorrow. Before taking her last breath, Sika asked him to promise to become a great king and to stop the wars between the 7 states, while uniting all the lands in mainland China. From that moment on, Aizi was determined to fulfill his promise to Sika, who sacrificed herself to save him. Returning to the present, Oki having heard Izzy's explanations, instructed Scene, who had been concealed behind a pillar, to gather everyone back to the royal hall. The Grand General announced his return to active duty as commander of the Qin army and appointed Scene, his disciple, as the leader of a specialized unit comprising 100 men directly under his command. To strengthen the army further, Scene enlisted Kyokai to join his forces. That night, before the battle began, Scene practiced martial arts with Kyokai, who possessed exceptional fighting skills inherited from her lineage of assassins. Curious, Scene asked about the source of her clan's extraordinary combat abilities. Kyokai then explained that her clan communicated with the gods through a sword dance ritual passed down through generations. During the ritual, individuals would be possessed with the spirits of the gods, so descendants of the assassin clan usually performed the ritual to fight off dozens of attackers. Despite the ritual's potency, other clans possessed similar abilities, and some martial artists unwittingly tapped into this power. Among them, the most formidable were those who believed themselves to be incarnations of gods, known as Bisin, whose martial prowess surpassed that of ordinary individuals. The following day, Oki led the Qin army towards the battlefield, ready to face the Zhao army, commanded by 3 battalion leaders, Choso, Mundgoku, and Fuki, who also served as strategists. On the other hand, Oki led 3 large units consisting of his elite troops, Raifui's troops under Mobu's leadership, and the main Qin army. Once the battle commenced, Mobu's troops immediately launched an attack on the enemy, followed by the elite troops on the left flank of the battlefield. As the battle commenced, Mobu's troops initiated an assault, followed by the elite forces attacking the left flank. Observing the Zio's restrained response, Oki ordered an overt attack despite being outnumbered, aiming to keep Scene's forces undetected by the enemy. Oki assigned Scene's unit the task of directly targeting and eliminating Fuki, the primary leader of the Zio forces, knowing Fuki's expertise in analyzing warfare could be detrimental to Qin's strategy. To divert Fuki's attention, Oki deployed 100 infantry troops, hoping they would be underestimated by the Zhao commander. Although some of Scene's members were initially hesitant about the attack they were about to launch, after Scene convinced his troops, they all began to infiltrate towards the enemy's rear defense lines by climbing the hills. Unfortunately, Zhao forces were also stationed in that hill area, which made Scene's troops have to confront the enemy forces, causing them some trouble. Continuously pressed by the opposing forces, Scene decided to divide his troops into 2 groups, where the first group would hold the cliff and block the enemy forces, while the other group, commanded directly by Scene, would continue the journey to behind the hill where Fuki was stationed. Reports of the Qin forces' infiltration into the hills appeared to have reached Fuki's attention. However, as he was preoccupied with organizing the main Zhao forces, he appeared not to pay much attention to the attack, especially since Scene's forces were not trained soldiers and numbered less than 100. At that time, Fuki perceived Scene's troops as insignificant compared to his large army. Meanwhile, on the primary battlefield, the elite Qin forces seemed to be gaining the upper hand with relentless assaults, prompting the Zhao frontline troops to retreat momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, the Qin warriors intensified their attack, unaware that it was a trap orchestrated by Fuki to swiftly eliminate them. As the Qin forces advanced, Fuki suddenly commanded his archers to rain arrows upon them. Due to this sudden attack, most of the Qin forces eventually faltered, and if left unchecked, the Qin forces would surely be defeated. On the other hand, Scene and his companions, observing the unfolding events from the hilltop, swiftly descended to launch a direct assault on Fuki, aiming to end the battle before the Qin forces faced total annihilation. Sensing the threat, Fuki's protective forces engaged Scene's group without delay. At that moment, Fuki, having seen the abilities of Scene and Kyokai in defeating the Zio forces, finally realized that he could not underestimate Scene's group, which turned out to be no ordinary force. Quickly, Fuki ordered all his troops to retreat before they were defeated by Scene's forces. Unfortunately, Fuki's efforts were too late because Scene and his group had successfully penetrated the tight defense of Fuki's protective forces, leading Scene to suddenly run towards the commander of the Zhao forces and attack him. With a single sword slash, Scene succeeded in killing Fu Qi, the main commander of the Zhao forces, signaling that the Qin forces had won the battle that day. Upon learning of Fu Qi's demise, Choso immediately ordered his troops to temporarily retreat and relocate their base to the hills. According to Oki, the victory was merely the start, as the true battle lay ahead. Later that night, after a day of battle, Scene with other soldiers gathered around a campfire to celebrate their victory on the battlefield's first day. In the midst of their happiness, they were all startled by the appearance of a man carrying a large weapon who attacked them. Scene and Kyokai tried to stop the man, but unfortunately, their strength was far below the mysterious man who introduced himself as Hauken, one of the feared Busin or war gods, instilling fear in Kyokai's assassin clan. Towards the film's conclusion, it is shown how news of Hauken's attack on the Qin forces finally reached the royal court, and Shobun-kun, who also heard the report, realized what was happening. Shobun-kun recalls a past incident involving Kyo, one of the Qin kingdom's 6 great generals and Oki's lover, who dueled with Hauken until Kyo suffered defeat because she did not realize that Hauken was a powerful Busin. Enraged by Kyo's death, Oki sought vengeance by challenging Hauken to a duel, managing to wound him gravely. Despite this, Hauken miraculously survived and disappeared thereafter, leaving his whereabouts unknown. Upon hearing of Oki leading the Qin forces against Shao, Hauken reemerges to seek revenge. At the same time, Oki, intending to descend to the battlefield against Shao, also realized the presence of Hauken, who sought revenge against him. Therefore, their appearance on the battlefield was closely related to the vendetta they carried from the past.